Hey guys, Starks here. I'm going to start a new video series on aiming traditional bows. There's 3 or 4 different ways to aim bows, and I'm not going to paint a negative light on any style. I'm just going to be explaining the differences, the how-tos, maybe where they came from. But we're going to talk about instinctive archery or instinctive aiming. We're going to talk about split vision aiming. We're going to talk about gap shooting or point on, and I'm going to touch on face walking too. I think that's kind of a lost art in the trad world. I'm probably not going to touch a lot on string walking. I'm a competitive traditional archer. I shoot traditional recurve and longbow. And when you get into the string walking on any of the associations I deal with, whether it be World Archery, NFAA, USA Archery, any of those, string walking is primarily for the barebow recurve guys. So I may touch on it, but we're not going to spend a lot of time there. But I am going to start tonight on the instinctive aiming. And we're going to kind of talk about the ins and outs of that. And instinctive aiming is just exactly what it sounds like. We pull up, we anchor, and we turn the arrow loose when it feels good to us. So instinctive aiming has been around for a lot of years. When I started shooting bows in the late 80s, early 90s as a boy, that's what I was taught. I was taught kind of how to shoot instinctively, and then I just kind of had to figure it out. And I think that is where a lot of us started on traditional archery especially. So let me give you a little bit of the mindset on instinctive aiming. Most instinctive archers use a glove. Like I said, back in the 80s, 90s, gloves were really popular. Probably even before that. Every picture I've ever seen of Fred Bear, I think he's wearing a glove. So this was a good or a proper piece of equipment for instinctive archers, and it still is today. The other thing that most instinctive archers will do, if you can see how my nocking point is a little higher, this bow is tillered for 3 under. The difference in that being at full draw, the bottom limb is a little weaker because the bottom half of the string is shorter. Most bows, back when everybody was learning to traditional shoot, and we're just going to talk about the 70s and 80s, back when the bear bows were very popular, bear being B-E-A-R, the Fred Bear bows. And about that time, the late 70s, he started in the compounds. But those were still shot primarily with gloves and split finger. So the nocking point on those gloves would be closer to neutral, maybe an 1/8 high or whatever. And it would be a split finger style. And what we've seen back in those days is everybody would split finger and corner of the mouth. Now I want you to look at this arrow, and this would have been a proper arrow, or is still a proper arrow for instinctive aiming. But look how short this arrow is. So that arrow is really close to my riser here. And that would be a proper instinctive form. Split finger, corner of the mouth anchor, grip and rip is what a lot of our guys say. Now the reason that those arrows need to be shot instinctive, most of the time they are out of our field of view. When we are looking at what we're aiming at, we don't even see that arrow point. If we do, it's really, really low in our sight picture. So what we were taught as kids, or those that still instinctive shoot, what you're taught is to look at your target and burn a hole through your target at what you're going to shoot at. Is that an effective way of shooting? Absolutely. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of trial and error, but you perform or you establish a muscle memory or a vision gap. So you know at 20 yards, when you draw back, it feels a certain way. At 10 yards, it feels a certain way. And that is instinctive. Very much so, just like it says. Very instinctive. I pull back, yeah, that feels about right, and I turn the arrow loose. I see a lot of that still today in the trad world, especially in our 3D shooters and our hunters. Here in Kentucky, we've got a lot of traditional archers who deer hunt. We've got a lot of traditional archers who shoot 3D. So that is the instinctive end of it. After a little while, it seemed like as it progressed, we started seeing tabs. But even our tabs were split finger. Some would have finger spacers, such as this. That keeps us from pinching the arrow. So to give you an idea on these tabs, one would just go over your finger like so. Again, a little lower knocking point at even or an eighth over. We're going to split finger style, corner of the mouth, and we're looking. So to give you an idea of my sight vision, if I'm aiming 10 yards out, the point of this arrow is about 3 feet down from where I would want that arrow to hit. And again, we're not actively aiming with the arrow tip. So that is the whole thing with Instinctive. We are actually just looking at what we want to hit, and we're going to go from there. So to give you an idea what it'll look like, if we're doing front on, if I am instinctive shooting and you're locking eyes with me now, you can see how much lower this arrow point is. So again, when you run into these instinctive archers out on a 3D course or out in the woods, they are very, very good at what they do. And a lot of those guys have had decades of experience shooting that way. But that is an older style of aiming. Like I said, nothing wrong with it. But we don't see as much instinctive shooting on guys who compete outside of a local level, whether it be state or national level, especially as you step into the indoor season where it's shooting paper targets. You don't see a lot of the instinctive. But again, like I said, that just kind of explains the instinctive end of archery. So gloves or tabs, usually the corner of your mouth, shorter arrows, and a lot of them will be really heavy up front. I've heard of guys putting 100 grains insert, 200 grain tip, 300 grains up front, really high FOC for penetration. All those are acceptable for a instinctive type aiming. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to go through the other steps of aiming as this series progresses. And if you've got any questions, comments, maybe you want to learn or need more information on what we're talking about, feel free to like and share. Comment on these videos. Let me know what you want to talk about. And like I said, guys, I don't want to shed a negative light on anything that I'm doing here, anything that I'm teaching or instructing you on. I don't want to talk bad about the instinctive guys or the gap shooters. I just want to put the information out there. And I think that is part of why traditional archery has grown so much in the last few years, is because that information is starting to trickle down to some of our archers. So, like I said, if you've got any questions, any comments, feel free to put them below. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you on the next video.